Hello, welcome to this training session on configuring menus and workflows. First, I'm going to give an introduction. Then we'll take a look at the menu introduction, menu configuration, connecting menus with roles and permissions. We'll take a look at an introduction to the workflow, how to configure the workflow. Then we'll take a look at a use case for the workflow. Finally, I'll summarize everything. With Open Solution Environment, OSE, you can effortlessly configure business objects, pages, menus, workflows, roles, and policies with an intuitive no-code drag-and-drop interface. We'll dive deeper into the menus and workflows in this course. In the Configuring Pages course, Medivonic has already created 3 purpose-built pages for managing external manufacturing purchase orders with Renderico. However, users can't easily access these pages. There's no structured navigation. There's no controlled lifecycle for external manufacturing POs. To solve this, Medivonic must configure a controlled workflow for external manufacturing purchase orders. Throughout this course, we'll configure a new menu, which will be named External Manufacturing Menu, a submenu, which will be named External Manufacturing Transactions, and a menu item that links to a search, new, or view edit page, a report, a dashboard, and a workflow with a new state called review. I'm now going to introduce you to the menus. Let's understand what a menu is and why we need it. A menu provides the navigation structure for accessing pages, reports, and dashboards inside a solution. It organizes navigation in a clear and consistent way. In simple terms, functionality may already exist in the solution through pages, but the menu defines how users access it. Without a configured menu, users can't easily access content after the solution is activated. Menus group related items, improve usability, and ensure users see only what their roles allow. For example, users in the operations role can see one menu, while users in the reporting role can see another menu. The menu items a user cannot access are automatically hidden. So even if everything is configured in the background, it becomes usable only when it's properly organized through a menu. Just note, a solution can have multiple menus if required. Menu example 1 can be a good example of a standard Mint menu, as there are menu items under a submenu, and menu example 2 for a standard Poet menu, as it contains menu items directly without a submenu. I'm now going to show you how to create a new menu in the system. Navigate to OSE, go to the main menu, and select Open Solution Environment here. Under Solution, go to Menus, and select Add New. Enter a menu name. We're going to call it External Manufacturing Menu. And for the menu display name, I'm just going to use the same name as the menu name. For solution, I'm going to select Mint Menu and Workflow. Then Save. The menu is then saved and appears on the Search Menus page. If you want to edit this menu, select Edit. You can change the names if necessary here. If you want to delete a menu, go back to Menus, select the menu you wish to delete, and delete it here. Let's now take a look at menu configuration. In the Opus user experience, the menu consists of submenus and menu items. A submenu is a grouping under a menu that organizes related menu items and helps categorize business objects by orchestration or use case. In this example, external manufacturing orchestration is a submenu. Purchase orders and invoices are menu items here. Menu items are the actual entry point that launches a page, report, or dashboard and is securely governed by roles, permissions, and policies, ensuring your users have access to only relevant information and operations. With OSE, you can create a unique menu for different internal users based on their roles. You can design distinct menu experiences for 2 different partners within the same process network. Even within the same partner, you can create different menu experiences for different partner users depending on their specific needs. Just note, the recommended design patterns are: submenus do not launch anything directly. Only menu items launch experiences. A menu should contain only menu items, or a menu should contain only submenus, and each submenu contains menu items. Having both menu items and submenus together is allowed, but not recommended because it can make navigation confusing. Let's see the menu configuration in action. Now I'm going to show you how to add, edit, and delete a submenu. First, I'm going to show you how to add a submenu under the menu we just created. Once again, go to Menus, select Filter, enter the menu name we just created, and apply. Click into the menu and select Edit. In the Submenus and Menu Items section, click the Add icon. Here you'll see a push panel appear. First, we're going to select whether it's a submenu or menu item. We're selecting submenu. Then we need to enter a name. We're calling it Transactions External Manufacturing. We'll enter the same for the display name. Then select Apply and Save. Just note, after creating the submenu, you can add specific menu items to it. Each menu item must represent a business object or action relevant to the submenu's context. If you want to edit the submenu, select Edit, select the submenu, and click on the pencil icon. Once again, the push panel appears, and you can change the name or display name as necessary. If you make any changes, be sure to select Apply and then Save. If you want to delete the submenu, once again make sure you're in Edit mode, highlight the submenu, and delete it. Just note, deleting a submenu also deletes all menu items within the submenu. Now let's add a menu item under the submenu we just created. Select the submenu and select the Add icon. This time we'll select menu item. We'll enter the name. In my example, I'm selecting Transactions of Render Eco, and I'll use the same name as the display name. If the target page type is a page, we can select the Target Page Type drop-down. We will select the page type that opens when a user selects the menu item. We have options like New. This provides all existing pages that creates new instances of application objects. Search. This provides all existing pages where users can view, search for, and create new object instances. View Edit. This provides all existing pages that show existing instances of objects and edit them if needed. LSE. This page is where users can search for, create, and list objects in a single interface. If the target page is a report dashboard, you'll select the target page type drop-down, and you'll select whether the menu item opens as a report or dashboard. I've selected dashboard in this case. Then you'll need to enter the scope. You'll select the scope of the report or dashboard. Global contains all available reports. Company contains reports that are tailored for a specific company. In dashboard name or report name, this is a type ahead field, and you'll enter the name of the report or dashboard to display. This one, for example. You'll then switch this to use the latest. In the auto navigation section, you can fill in the following fields based on the business object type to be associated with the menu item. In the new page dropdown, this is the name of the new page that appears when a user selects the new button on the search page associated with the menu item. I'll select this one, for example. For the search page, this is the name of the page that appears when a user selects the menu item. I'll select this one. And View Edit Page. This is the name of the View Edit page that appears when a user selects a link in the search page or the Save button in the new page associated with the menu item. This one, for example. Then select Apply and Save. If you want to edit the menu item, select Edit, highlight the menu item line, and use the pencil icon to edit this. Here you can make the changes in the push panel. Remember, if you make any changes, select Apply and then Save. Also, if you want to delete the menu item, highlight it again and select Delete here, then Save. This is just something for you to think about. When would you use a submenu instead of placing all menu items directly under a menu? A submenu is useful when we want to group related menu items under a logical category. For example, if there are several items related to external manufacturing transactions, we can place them under one submenu. This keeps navigation clean and helps users find related actions more easily. Now on to connecting menus with roles permissions. Menus and roles work closely together to control what users can see and access in a solution. A menu provides the navigation structure for accessing pages, reports, and dashboards inside a solution. However, simply configuring a menu does not mean every user will see all its items. The contents of the menu are determined by the user's role. Menu items that a user does not have permission to access are automatically hidden in the UI. This means visibility is role-based. End users interact with menus through the left navigation panel. If a role has permission for a menu item, it appears in the navigation. If not, it doesn't appear at all. The order in which menu items are configured is the same order in which they appear in the UI, so configuration order directly affects the user experience. Just note, the menu cannot be deleted if there are already permissions assigned for its menu items under roles. In that case, the permissions must be removed first. Now I'm going to give an introduction to workflows. Workflows are powerful mechanisms that enhance business process management by providing structure, automation, and integration. Each object, for example, purchase order, comes with a standard workflow. You can view their current state on the New and View page and move through their states on the Edit page. Substates and transitions. You add substates which are associated to a base state. You add transitions between those substates and other base states. You can also add transition conditions and post-transition actions to those transitions. Just note, before configuring your workflow in Open Solution Environment, OSE, identify your specific business requirements and define the desired workflow states, transitions, conditions, and actions. Some of this definition occurs during the model stage and may require collaboration with the Opus developer. Diagramming a workflow is a great exercise to drive that definition while curating your business object. This should be done early in the definition process. Modeling your objects correctly will make configuring your workflow much easier. Workflows in OSE are organized into two types, and it's important for us to clearly understand the difference. Let me explain this in a simple way. The first type is the standard workflow. A standard workflow includes a predefined sequence of states and transitions for an object type. These base states are defined by the application developer and can't be customized by solution users. So we can say that you cannot modify the standard workflow. The second type is the company workflow. This workflow extends the standard workflow to support unique business requirements. It provides flexibility and configuration options while still following the base workflow definition. Every business object type associated with a solution gets its own workflow within that solution. By default, it follows the same definition as the base workflow. Here's the key point I want you to remember. We can't change the standard workflow. However, we can extend it in our company workflow. We can add new substates under base states, add transitions between states, define transition conditions, and define transition actions. Just note, only new substates can be added. Base states themselves can't be modified. So when you're designing workflows in your solution, think of the standard workflow as the fixed foundation. The company workflow is where you extend and adapt that foundation to meet your business needs. Let's configure a standard workflow by adding a new review substate. We're now going to take a look at how to configure the workflows. We're going to configure the workflow for our render eco scenario by adding a substate. Under Solution, go to Workflows. I already have a filter applied. I'm going to select this one. Now I'm going to edit. And in the Workflow States and Transitions section, select Add. The base state is a type ahead field. I'm selecting Base Prepare Inbound. For the substate field, it's the substate to add more granular states within a base state. For example, Reviewer. I'll enter the same name for the display name. I'm going to switch the start state to yes. Then apply. You'll notice the new substate in the table now. Be sure to save any changes. If you want to make any changes to the substate, once again select Edit. Select the line and the pencil icon. Perhaps we want to change the substate to Review. Then apply and save. Now I'm going to show you how to add a transition. Once again, select Edit. In the Workflow States and Transitions section, select the Review substate. To add a new transition, select the hierarchy icon, and we're entering Process Inbound for the To state. The next fields are transition conditions and transition actions. Before entering information in these fields, let's understand them. We'll leave this demo as it is for now, and I'll switch back to my slides to talk about transition conditions and actions. So let's talk about transition conditions. A transition condition controls whether a transition is allowed to happen. It's a value at runtime, and the transition proceeds only when the condition returns true. If the condition returns false, the transition fails and the object does not move to the next state. Transition conditions are used to enforce business rules. For example, prevent moving to approved if a required field is empty. Block submission if a value exceeds a limit. Transition conditions are implemented as pre-transition conditions and must be written as a single line of JavaScript code. Now let's talk about transition actions. Transition actions are often called post-transition actions. They run automatically after a transition completes successfully. These actions allow the workflow to perform additional logic such as updating attributes, creating related objects, sending notifications, calling an external API. It's important to understand that transition actions run after the state change has already happened. If there's an error in the transition action, the state update will still succeed. The error will be returned to the user, but the transition itself will not be blocked. I'm going to show you now how to remove a transition. First, I'm entering a snippet of the JavaScript in the transition condition field. This JavaScript snippet example for transition conditions signifies that this script passes the workflow payload, checks whether data.test document name is equal to test, logs the result, and returns true if the document name is test or false, or if it is not. Now let's add the snippet to the transition action field. This JavaScript snippet example of a transition action says that this custom transition action updates the test document author field in the transaction payload with a new author name and email. It logs the updated author details and returns the modified transaction payload back to the TWR for saving to S3. Now I'm going to select Apply, and if we expand this row, we can see the two states, process inbound. Now we'll save this. Should you wish to remove a transition, select Edit, click the arrow of any substate containing transitions in the workflow states and transitions table. Select the desired transition to state. Then click on the Remove icon. In the Push panel, you'll see a confirmation message. If you do wish to remove it, select Apply. Now onto a use case for a workflow. In this scenario, BMC, the owner, receives invoices from ICS, a service provider and partner, on behalf of the MEH Indivia. In this scenario, BMC, the owner, receives invoices from ICS, a service provider and partner, on behalf of the MEH. Before those invoices go to BMC's system, BMC wants a user to manually review and approve them. So, the goal is to pause the transaction in Opus, allow the user to review the invoice, and then let the user approve it. Once the user approves it, Opus continues the workflow and triggers the outbound process to BMC's ERP system. In the standard flow, the transaction continues through the workflow without a manual approval checkpoint. For BMC, we need a controlled pause. The invoice should stop at a review point, and the user should decide what happens next. If the user approves the invoice, the transaction continues to outbound processing. If the user rejects it, the transaction does not continue through the normal outbound path. This configurable workflow gives BMC control before the invoice reaches its downstream system. In this use case, we configure the workflow to add a transaction pause state. The configuration starts from the latest Mint solution. We save it as a company solution, then navigate to the workflow page and configure the required business object workflow. For this use case, the key review substates are pending review, approved, and rejected. You're already aware of how to create substates as discussed in demos earlier in this course. The important point is that the transaction moves into pending review and pauses there. The user then reviews the invoice in Opus and moves it to approved. Once approved, the transaction continues to outbound processing. After adding substates, the workflow details page will show all the newly added substates under Workflow States and Transitions table. We'll now add transitions with Transition Action JavaScript snippet. Our first action is when a transaction goes from prepare inbound state to process inbound state. It will move to pending review substate, and the transaction should pause on the UI and not move to other states. We'll require a transition for prepare inbound state to state pending review. We'll use the transition action as seen here under Transition Actions field. The next transition will be from pending review to approved or rejected. You'll notice no transition conditions as of now, since we're only going to show pending review to approved by user action on the UI. After this, the next transition will be from approved to prepare outbound. In this use case, the CMO, the partner at Brasana Labs, is sending advanced ship notice transactions to the MEH owner, LifeBlend. Currently, the status is pending review as it's waiting for manual approval. When the transaction moves from prepare inbound toward process inbound, the configured workflow moves it to the pending review substate. At that point, the transaction pauses on the UI and does not continue to other states automatically. The transition logic sets the transaction process status to paused. This pause is what gives the user time to review the invoice before it continues. As soon as the user clicks on the delivery number, the advanced shipment notice details will display. From pending review, the user can move the transaction either to approved or rejected. For this use case, we focus on the approval path. When the user approves the transaction, the workflow moves it from approved to prepare outbound. So the workflow combines system-controlled pausing with user-controlled approval. The user also needs to update the process status dropdown to submitted. As soon as the user saves the transaction, it will move to preparing to send state and would complete eventually. So that's how this configurable workflow allows BMC to review invoices before they reach the downstream ERP system. Now something for you to think about. Why do we need a workflow if users can manually update information on a page? A workflow is needed because it defines how an object transitions between states during its life cycle. It helps ensure that objects of the same type follow the same process and move through defined states and transitions consistently. When designing workflows, it's very important to follow certain rules. These rules ensure that the workflow works correctly and avoids errors. Let's go step by step. First, rules for substates. State names must be unique within a workflow. When adding a new state, you must select a valid base state to create a substate. Only new substates can be added. Base states cannot be modified. Every added substate must have at least one incoming transition. It's also recommended that each added state has at least one outgoing transition, unless it is a final or terminal state. If a base state is marked as a begin state, then at least one new substate under it must also be marked as a begin state. Multiple states can be marked as start states. However, more than one substate cannot be set as the default starting state. Next, rules for transitions. A transition defines movement from one state to another. The from state and to state must be valid base states or substates. The from state and to state cannot be the same. A transition cannot be created from a substate to its own base state. Similarly, a transition cannot be created from a base state to the substate under it. Also, whenever adding transitions between substates, an equivalent base transition must exist. These rules ensure consistency between base states and substates. Now, rules for transition conditions. Transition conditions are evaluated before the state update happens. If the from state is begin, the condition will not execute. If the from state is not begin, the condition runs as a prerequisite to the update. If the condition returns false, the transition fails and an invalid transition error is shown. If the condition returns true, the transition succeeds. Conditions must be written as a single line of JavaScript code. Multi-line expressions are not supported and will fail at runtime. Finally, rules for transition actions. Transition actions execute after the transition happens. Because they run after the update, any errors in transition actions do not block the workflow state change. The update will still succeed, but the error will be returned to the user. Transition actions are used to automate logic such as updating fields, creating related objects, or triggering notifications. Once again, something to think about. What could go wrong if we add a substate but do not add the right transitions? If a substate does not have the right transitions, it may not be usable. Every added state must have at least one incoming transition, and it's recommended to have one outgoing transition unless it's a terminal state. Transitions define the allowed paths between states. I'm now going to conclude with a summary. In this course, we focused on two main configuration areas, menus and workflows. A menu provides the navigation structure for accessing pages, reports, and dashboards inside a solution. It helps organize navigation in a clear and consistent way. We also saw that menus can include submenus and menu items. Submenus help group related items, while menu items are the actual entry points that open a page, report, or dashboard. Another important point is that menus work together with roles and permissions. Users only see the menu items their role allows them to access. If they don't have permission, the item is hidden from the UI. Then we looked at workflows. A workflow defines how an object moves through different states during its life cycle. It helps control the business process and keeps object movement consistent. We also discussed that a standard workflow provides the base structure and can't be changed. However, a company workflow can extend the standard workflow to support specific business needs. In workflow configuration, we covered how to add substates, transitions, transition conditions, and transition actions. A transition condition runs before the transition and decides whether the state change is allowed. A transition action runs after the transition and can perform follow-up logic such as updating attributes, creating objects, sending notifications, or calling an API. So the main takeaway is menus help users find the right place, roles control what users can see, workflows control how the business process moves forward. Together, these configurations help create a structured, secure, and consistent user experience. So in this course today, we took a look at an introduction to the menus, how to configure menus, connecting menus with roles permissions, an introduction to workflows, how to configure workflows, a use case for workflows, and finally, I summarized the session. Thank you for your time watching the training session today. If you do have any follow-up questions, please email tracinguniversity@tracing.com.